Hi, I'm Brogan Hayes, and you're watching One to Watch. Due to the World Cup being on, cinema releases this week are sort of slow, so it was easy for me to choose this week's One to Watch. It is Love Eternal, the second film from Irish director Brendan Muldowney. It's based on a Japanese novel called In Love with the Dead, and as the title may suggest, there are strains and threads of, dare I say it, necrophilia running through the film. After his father dies in front of him when he's a young boy, Ian, played by Robert De Hoog, becomes increasingly isolated and introverted, finding it difficult to come to terms with seeing death up close and personal. Sadly, when he gets older, his mom also dies, leaving him in an absolute spiral, obsessed with death and afraid of it and wanting to embrace it, and finding people who have similar outlooks or similar experiences to him and bonding with them in the most unusual of manners. It's great to see Irish director Brendan Muldowney move away from the sort of inner city Dublin violent stories that we see so often in Irish cinema, and that is also the basis of his first film, Savage. Oddly, Love Eternal actually does feel like a love story, even though, yes, it does deal with the idea of death, the idea of losing someone and being lost yourself, and the idea of necrophilia. It's only hinted at in the film. There's no blatant out and out, but you kind of get what's going on there. Robert De Hoog is great as the almost catatonic Ian. He drifts closer to death, his own and other people's, and finds a way to relate to the people around him and finds a way to open up to the people around him. And it's really when he meets Naomi, played by Pollyanna McIntosh, that he finds a kindred spirit. But while Naomi is dealing with death over this side and dealing with it in one way, he's dealing with death over this side in a very, very different way. But there are times when the two ideas crash into one another. Pollyanna McIntosh manages to make Naomi a tragic character, but a strong character as well. She's a woman who's experienced death up close and personally as well. She has been hugely affected by it, but she's trying to move on with her life. She's trying to accept it as part of life and to learn from it and to grow from it and to not let it define her. Which is interesting to Ian because death really does sort of define his whole experience of life. I've touched on the fact that In Love with the Dead is a book about necrophilia and about a love affair with the dead. And it would be easy for Love Eternal to be a very sordid and uncomfortable and unpleasant sort of affair, but Muldowney somehow manages to make Ian a really relatable character because he's searching for an emotional connection with somebody, but it can't be a superficial one because death has so profoundly impacted upon him, and this is what he finds when he meets Naomi. As well as this, Muldowney's observation of how people deal with death and how they try to just carry on living even though their world has been torn apart is really, really accurate and really, really touching. As well as this, Muldowney does not shy away from the uncomfortable aspect of a person dealing with death and coming to terms with death and accepting that we're all going to die at some point in our lives. And it's in this way that Love Eternal, yes, is a tragic story, but it ends in a curiously uplifting sort of way. Out of 10, I'd give Love Eternal 8. It's a great film, great performances, hugely relatable experiences given to these characters. I mean, if you've ever experienced any sort of loss, be it a breakup, the death of a pet, the death of somebody that you love, you will be able to relate to these characters on both sides. The chemistry between Robert De Hoog and Pollyanna McIntosh is great. There are great scenes of joy and there are some great scenes of despair as well, which somehow meld together to leave us on a surprisingly uplifting note. This week's One to Watch is Love Eternal, and until next week, I've been Brogan Hayes. This has been One to Watch.